The dark secret of narcissists. The one emotion they can never fake or feel. There is one emotion that stands as the ultimate mirror, the one that reveals the soul's true shape. It's an emotion narcissists cannot manage, mimic, or truly comprehend. Psychologists often describe this as the ultimate fracture in their emotional architecture, a void where humility, empathy, and spiritual surrender should live. No matter how refined their manipulation becomes, they cannot grasp this feeling because it requires something they fundamentally lack, a heart that knows how to kneel before something greater than itself. For most people, this emotion flows naturally from connection and love. For narcissists, it feels like exposure, like being dragged into sunlight after living too long in the dark. That emotion is gratitude, and to the narcissist, it feels like annihilation. According to clinical psychologist Dr. Craig Malkin, gratitude forces the narcissist to acknowledge dependency, a reality that shatters their illusion of self-sufficiency. Gratitude requires recognizing the good in others, but narcissists are emotionally allergic to the idea that anyone but themselves could be responsible for their well-being. To them, emotions are transactions. If they show affection, it's to get admiration. If they express empathy, it's to maintain control. Their inner world is governed by the principle of exchange, never by genuine feeling. Yet gratitude demands surrender. It demands acknowledgement of another person's goodness without condition. That kind of vulnerability feels like humiliation to them, and humiliation is their deepest wound. Psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that narcissists live in a psychological structure built on what's called fragile grandiosity. They maintain their sense of worth through constant validation, because beneath the mask lies a deep shame, an unbearable conviction of worthlessness. Gratitude threatens to expose that shame. To say thank you sincerely would mean admitting they were in need, that someone else had something they lacked. So instead, they twist the emotion. When they say thank you, it's often laced with resentment. Deep down, they don't believe you helped them. They believe you merely fulfilled their rightful due. This is why, as trauma therapists note, their gratitude always feels mechanical, a performance, not a pulse. Narcissists have learned to mimic human warmth through observation. They study facial expressions, emotional tones, and social cues with the precision of an actor preparing for a role. Psychologist Dr. Joe Navarro, an expert in nonverbal behavior, describes this as emotional mirroring without empathy, a learned imitation that tricks others into believing they're genuine. When you thank them, they mimic the cadence of gratitude. When you cry, they match your sadness. But watch closely, their eyes never soften. Their energy never shifts. It's mimicry without melody, a song played on broken strings. Gratitude, however, requires integration, not imitation. It asks the psyche to acknowledge interdependence, to see life as a shared experience rather than a battlefield for superiority. But narcissists view life through the lens of dominance and scarcity. According to psychoanalyst Otto Kernberg, their minds are organized around a defense mechanism called splitting, a rigid separation between superior me and inferior others. Gratitude blurs that separation. It suggests that everyone, even the narcissist, is both giver and receiver. For them, that's intolerable. The very concept of equality feels like erosion. So they reject gratitude and retreat to control, feeding instead on validation, domination, and illusion. Over time, this rejection corrodes the soul. Psychologists who study long-term narcissistic patterns note a visible physical and emotional decay, what trauma specialist Dr. Judith Orloff calls energetic starvation. Like a tree refusing water, the narcissist's spirit begins to dry from the inside out. Their bodies may remain strong, their wealth may grow, but their energy becomes brittle. You can see it in their faces, the tension around their mouths, the emptiness behind their smiles. Their voices grow sharp, their laughter hollow. They might still perform success, but the vitality behind it fades. This spiritual drought isn't metaphorical, it's psychological. Gratitude, as positive psychology research shows, activates neural pathways associated with joy, resilience, and connection. It literally nourishes the brain's ability to regulate emotion. When that pathway is blocked by entitlement, the psyche collapses inward. Narcissists, by rejecting gratitude, cut themselves off from the neurobiological mechanisms that sustain emotional balance. They lose the capacity to feel contentment, so they seek stimulation instead. Every achievement becomes empty, every victory fleeting. Victims often describe this experience as being trapped in an emotional desert, giving and giving, while the narcissist absorbs everything like dry sand. Clinical psychologists emphasize that this dynamic, called narcissistic supply, is how the narcissist sustains their fragile ego. They extract emotional energy from others because they cannot generate it themselves. But no matter how much they take, they remain starving for the one emotion they cannot metabolize: gratitude. Recovery begins the moment the victim stops trying to fill that void. Therapists working with survivors often stress the importance of radical detachment, the act of stepping out of the narcissist's gravitational pull. When you reclaim gratitude for yourself, you reclaim your life force. You begin to see that gratitude isn't just a moral virtue, it's psychological oxygen. It restores perspective, balance, and spiritual coherence. It reconnects you to something larger, something narcissists have long abandoned: the living current of love that flows between all human souls. And when you see the narcissist years later, their eyes tired, their smile rehearsed, their presence strangely empty, you'll understand. They didn't just lose relationships or opportunities. They lost their connection to the source. In rejecting gratitude, they rejected life itself. Gratitude is the quiet architect of inner wholeness. It is the emotion that fills the heart with meaning, creating a bridge between who we are and what we receive. Without it, all that remains is a spiritual famine, an endless hunger that no amount of wealth, attention, or beauty can satisfy. Narcissists live in this famine. As psychologists like Dr. Ramani Durvasula and Dr. Craig Malkin often explain, they exist in a state of chronic psychological deprivation. Their grandiosity is merely a mask stretched over a bottomless sense of lack. They may collect admiration, money, and power, but each gain evaporates the moment it arrives. The narcissistic psyche, driven by entitlement and shame, is like a vessel that can never hold water, no matter how much you pour into it. This hunger becomes their life's rhythm. More validation, more control, more applause. Psychologists call this the narcissistic cycle of reinforcement. It's an endless loop of seeking external approval to soothe internal emptiness. But because that validation never addresses the wound beneath, the deep insecurity and self-loathing, they must chase again. Their lives resemble what Dr. Judith Orloff calls the spiritual marketplace of the ego. A constant buying, trading, and bargaining for worth. Everything they do is a transaction designed to silence the echo of inner emptiness. I saw this haunting pattern unfold in my own father. He had everything a man could dream of: a home that gleamed, a life adorned with success. Yet his words were saturated with despair. He would sit in quiet luxury and murmur, "I'm small. I'm unlucky." Psychologists might describe this as learned helplessness intertwined with grandiosity, a contradictory blend of superiority and victimhood. It's how many narcissists reconcile the gap between who they pretend to be and who they fear they are. Life, of course, mirrors belief. The energy he radiated, dissatisfaction, self-pity, and bitterness, became his reality. As trauma experts often note, chronic ingratitude doesn't just affect mood. It shapes destiny. His abundance turned sour because gratitude never took root in his spirit. That's the curse of narcissism. Words become spells. Every complaint reinforces their prison. Psychologists emphasize that language reflects cognitive bias. When someone repeatedly frames themselves as a victim, the brain literally wires itself to perceive more injustice. For narcissists, this means they manifest the misery they project. Gratitude could dissolve the pattern, but they resist it because true gratitude requires surrender, the acknowledgement that something good exists beyond the self. To them, that surrender feels like death. Dr. Brené Brown often notes that gratitude is impossible without vulnerability, the willingness to admit need, weakness, or interdependence. But narcissists reject all three. They can't face their wounds because that would destroy the illusion of perfection. They can't recognize blessings because that would mean admitting someone else contributed to their well-being. so they live in the illusion that the world owes them everything. When life fails to deliver, their frustration deepens, feeding the cycle of bitterness and blame. Psychologist Dr. Sam Vaknin explains that narcissists often interpret kindness as proof of their own superiority. You helped me because I deserve it. When something goes wrong, it's never their fault. Accountability would collapse their fragile ego. Gratitude, which thrives on humility, withers in such soil. It's like trying to plant seeds on stone. Nothing can take root where the heart is hardened by entitlement. Even when they attempt gratitude, it feels hollow. Trauma therapists describe this as performative empathy, emotional mimicry without authentic resonance. Their thank you is a linguistic costume, an act of social conformity rather than heartfelt emotion. You can sense it in the texture of their tone, overly polite, yet devoid of softness. To them, gratitude is a transaction. I'll thank you, as long as you continue to serve my ego. The moment you falter, they weaponize memory, reminding you of what they've done, twisting generosity into obligation. Psychologists across cultures have long emphasized that gratitude is not just a virtue, it's a neuropsychological state. Studies in positive psychology reveal that gratitude activates regions of the brain associated with joy and connection, increasing serotonin and dopamine levels. In contrast, narcissists who reject gratitude live in chronic emotional deprivation. Their nervous systems remain locked in fight-or-flight mode, a state of perpetual threat and scarcity. That's why, as researchers like Dr. Wendy Behari point out, they are drawn to conflict and control. Chaos feels safer than vulnerability. Spiritually and psychologically, this disconnection forms a vacuum. Narcissists drain others to replenish what they cannot generate internally. It's why survivors of narcissistic abuse often describe feeling empty or exhausted. They've been feeding a psychic black hole. Therapists urge survivors to recognize this dynamic as emotional vampirism, not as a metaphor, but as an energetic truth. The narcissist consumes your compassion, attention, and care, but offers no nourishment in return. The way out begins when you pull yourself out of their orbit. In therapy, this process is called detaching with awareness, learning to observe without absorbing. As you withdraw, you may feel both grief and relief. But over time, something miraculous happens. Your inner world starts to heal. Gratitude, once suppressed by manipulation, begins to flow again. You rediscover joy in small things, connection in simple kindness. Gratitude becomes your protection, your anchor back to reality. Across all cultures, ancient myths warn of beings cursed by endless hunger, demons, spirits, or monsters that devour but are never satisfied. Psychologists interpret these archetypes as mirrors of the narcissistic psyche, symbols of what happens when the soul loses connection to gratitude. The narcissist is a modern echo of those myths, outwardly powerful, inwardly starving. Their eyes reveal it. Behind the confidence lies chaos. Behind the charm, a void. They feed on emotional energy, yet reject the only force that could ever heal them, the quiet grace of thankfulness. In the end, they become like beings without reflection. Gratitude is what allows the human mind to integrate truth, to see itself clearly, light and shadow alike. Without it, the narcissist sees only distortion, a projection of who they wish to be, never who they truly are. If you've loved someone like this, you've likely felt that emptiness too, that sense of giving endlessly and still being unseen. Psychologists remind us that sharing your story is not weakness. It's recovery in motion. By speaking your truth, you reclaim your narrative. So tell your story. Let your voice break the spell of silence. And as you do, let gratitude, real, grounded gratitude, become the light that leads you back home.